So welcome back to our afternoon sessions of the 6th Annual Diversity Symposium at Central Michigan University. And if you've been with us all day, you know that we are taking various approaches to dissecting both the idea of anti-racist and as part of CMU's effort to embrace an anti-racist identity. As part of the symposium and for this afternoon, we are taking a little different direction by looking at art and activism. So this particular section, in fact, is called Art in Activism, a reconstruction of the written word and Jim Crow. Our participants today are Marcel Mars Davis and Corby Blem. In this particular conversation, we'll discuss two artistic pieces, one by Davis and one by Blem. These two pieces tell different stories, different but similar stories of the prevalence of Jim Crow in contemporary society. We will take a moment to discuss Davis's song, Me at the Zoo, which offers a lyrical and historical view of how Black life is devalued and the feeling of dehumanization as part of being Black in American society. Additionally, we'll use today's conversation to talk about Blem's piece, Eeny Meeny Miney Crow, a carnival game depiction of the too often bleak circumstances who are doing ordinary things and drawing extraordinary criticism, suspicion, harassment, and overall discriminatory actions. This piece was a top 5 finalist for the People's Choice Award at ArtWalk Central in 2018. So now we get to hear from the artists themselves and what inspired them to create these pieces.
My name is Corby Blem, and art fairs. Thank you, Dr. Murray. My name is Corby Blem, and I am a local artist. I have been creating artwork in the Mount Pleasant area since 2004. I teach art workshops. I have participated in local art fairs, and I have drawn caricatures also at many events here at the university. It has been my pleasure to be able to be part of today's Diversity Symposium. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. It's a simple rhyme. It's a little rhyme. And as a kid, I said it all the time when I wanted to first figures or Hot Wheels cars. I'd line them up, I'd tap through them to the rhythm of the poem, and boom, selection. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and you are not it. But that word was there, right there in the poem, that disparaging word for the item to be chosen, that degrading word that stands for a man, a woman, a person. I didn't get why it was there, and I thought it was peculiar and funny and delightfully forbidden. I always pictured myself catching a brown man on his brown toe because he deserved to be caught, because he could be caught so easily, because what? Thankfully, my sister heard me using the rhyme, and she gently taught me soon enough to instead say tiger. Catch a tiger by the toe. It's much more ridiculous. It certainly made me laugh. It's much more nonsensical. Yet, the Jim Crow culture of this rhyme continues. Who can we catch today? Some folks at a barbecue? How about a group of golfers moving too slowly for your liking? Maybe a cable guy inspecting your house, or some women packing their car after a vacation. Let's catch two guys waiting for their business associate at a coffee shop. Let's catch a college student. Let's catch a little girl selling water to raise money for a vacation. Eeny, meeny, miny, crow, and you are not it. I'd like for you to meet all the way to your left, Rashawn Nelson, who along with his business partner, Dante Robinson, was waiting on a third person to show up for a meeting at a coffee shop in Philadelphia. They hadn't yet ordered anything. They needed to use the bathroom. They were arrested. I've waited at coffee shops before, sometimes by myself or with my wife or with my niece and nephew. We don't order anything until everybody arrives. I've used the bathroom without buying a thing. I've never been arrested for waiting at a coffee shop. Make America great again? Eeny, meeny, miny, crow, and you are not it. I'd like you to meet in the middle, Lolode Sayambola, a graduate student at Yale, working towards her master's degree in African Studies. Lolode was writing a paper in the common area outside her dorm room. She dozed off. The cops were called. I've been to college. I've written those late night papers with a looming deadline, dozing in public because there simply wasn't enough time in the day. I've dozed in an airport, on the subway. I've dozed in church. I've never had the cops called on me for dozing. Make America great. And you are not it. On your right, meet young Jordan Rogers. She sold water in front of her apartment building to raise money for a trip to Disneyland. Jordan was being really loud about it. She's an exuberant entrepreneur. She's also 8. A neighbor threatened to call the cops. I was an obnoxious kid. I sold grape Kool-Aid for $0.25 every day at 5 o'clock when the factory across the street would let out. I would gather old books and sell them in boxes in our front yard. I once walked into the office of our mayor uninvited, requesting money for a fundraiser which he couldn't say no to. I was an exuberant 8-year-old entrepreneur. No one called the cops. Make America great again? Eeny, meeny, miny, crow, and you are not it. The early 20th century carnival game, African Dodger, was so popular culturally that even Popeye and Donald Duck made sport of putting black men in their place only to win a cigar. You could play it at carnivals. You could play it at the World's Fair. You could even play it at church camp. A sheet with a cutout hole draped for a man to poke his head through, and almost always a black man, would then ask players to throw a baseball, attempt. This horrifying game inspired my artwork. My goal was to make a piece about our culture's openly reignited racism. I created this carnival booth in which participants, presumably white participants, could literally throw the phrase, "Make America Great Again," printed on a red ball at the face of targeted black citizens. It is a deliberately grotesque game that I created. And yet this game is played every day by white people, fearful of losing grip on the systems that keep them in power. More recently, it was played when a white woman called 911 on a bird watcher in Central Park in New York City. It was also played when the police were called on a black teenager for stealing a cell phone in the lobby of a hotel, only later to be discovered in the seat of a white person's car. Although our culture's racist history has been openly stoked and reignited, so has the outspokenness of those willing to confront it. So have the voices of allies, champions, and defenders who say to their white family and white friends around them, now it's your turn to speak up. Step up. Do your own research. Stop talking and listen. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and you are it.
So, can you hear me? Is this working? Okay. So that was pretty awesome, Corby, to get some of that inspiration behind that art piece. I'll talk a little bit about mine, about my piece. Me at the Zoo is actually a song. Well, let me backtrack a little bit. My name's Marcel Davis. I am one of the academic advisors in the College of Education and Human Services here at Central Michigan University, and I am also an artist with the Refuge Creative Collective. Um, and when I created this "Me at the Zoo" song, there wasn't one inspirational event that happened, but more of a culmination of public killings of Black people um, that kind of triggered me. Uh, I would jump on Facebook and, just to check it. Like we go on Facebook just to check in with family and friends, but sometimes you jump on Facebook and you see another Black person killed by police and just being unexpectedly bombarded with images of dead Black bodies. But also, what hurt me was just seeing the lack of empathy and sympathy and conversation with different people. The character assassin, I was extremely moved. But it seemed like it was just a endless like series of Black people dying. So, thinking about Eric Garner, July 2014, Michael Brown, August 2014, Tamir Rice, November 2014, Freddie Gray, April 2015, Walter Scott, April 2015, Sandra Bland, July 2015, Philando Castile, July 2016, Alton Sterling, July 2016. So all of these things, all of these instances of killings just being like heavily seen on social media. These killings reminded me of the relationship the United States has with Black people. These things have always been happening, but now we have social media. Everybody has a camera. However, the sentiment hasn't changed. We keep saying Black Lives Matter, but things keep the way things are going show us that they don't. They didn't matter during the transatlantic slave trade. Even when the transatlantic slave trade ended in 1807, it continued in the United States and abroad, like the slave trade continued. So it didn't matter then. It didn't matter after the Civil War and Reconstruction when the KKK terrorized Black people to curb the gains of Reconstruction. Black lives didn't matter when Tulsa, Oklahoma, aka Black lives didn't matter in the Tuskegee experiments. Black lives didn't matter in old Jim Crow. Black lives didn't matter because of redlining, white flight, eminent domain, gentrification. Black lives didn't matter when crack hit the inner cities. There was no outcry about a public health crisis. COINTELPRO, the Southern Strategy, America continues to show us through these different things that Black lives don't matter and even create whole movements to counteract the fight for Black people to be humanized in the USA. So, all of this made me think of a quote from James Baldwin: to be a Negro in this country and to be relatively conscious is to be in a rage almost all the time. I never thought that the issues of racism had receded in the US, but everything was so shocking and traumatic. But at the same time, it wasn't. It wasn't shocking because after we keep seeing these things, we know the cycle. Black person gets killed by the police or some other well-meaning individual. The story hits the internet. There's protests. The perpetrator is not charged, or they get a slap on the hand. There's a protest. The perpetrator. There's more protests. The protest dies down. Another person, Black person, is killed, and the cycle repeats itself. I watched many people who don't look like me express that they felt America was better. That's never been a reality for a lot of Black people in this country. And it was from this place that I poured into this track. This thought drove me to reflect on some historical atrocities that Black folk have experienced at the hands of racism and reflect on personal experiences where I felt racism played a role in my life and the life of loved ones. So that's uh, that's the inspiration behind this piece. Yeah. And we're gonna listen to my track, Me at the Zoo.
All right, so here we are in front of the elephants. Cool thing about these guys is that they have really, really, really long fronts, and that's cool. And that's pretty much all there is to say.
Yeah. Yeah. They calling us animals. They treat us like animals. They kill us like animals. It's me at the zoo. They calling us animals. They treat us like animals. They kill us like animals. It's me at the zoo. Father, are we an experiment? Is it in my head? What they chef us in buildings and call it a project? Why they stick us with syphilis? Where was they conscious? Why they killing our children? Like it's a contest. Terrorists, no bomb threats. I'm terrorized cause I'm Black and I'm reading right to these politicians. Why they weighing our future, no pirates. I'm watching it on Facebook. I'm wondering if I'm next. I'm Christian, educated, professional, but I'm Black and I'm from the hood. Went to public schools and I rap. Can you blame me if I'm paranoid? Let me take y'all a little while back to 2010. Me and a couple friends going to Florida from Michigan through Georgia in a rickety van. Chris driving and we swerving. Whoa, yeah. I was sleeping. Chris woke me up, said get my wallet. The police need it, so I do it without hesitation. An officer reaching for his piece, pointed at me screaming, I'm going to Jesus. What I'm thinking. They calling us animals. They treat us like animals. They kill us like animals. It's me at the zoo. They calling us animals. They treat us like animals. They kill us like animals. It's me at the zoo. I'm watching the news, it depressed me. Yeah, got me feeling very heavy. Letting my hometown's water. Got me worried about my family. Yep. Snotty cutting costs, snotty cutting corners, and it ended very badly. Yep. I know the Lord is my shepherd, but I feel stuck in this valley. If we were white and affluent, would this ever have happened? Nope. Was this an experiment? Like syphilis, history showing us patterns. Do our lives really matter? Nope. Did our lives ever matter? Nope. From the beginning, our Black bodies have been treated and traded as cattle. We were taught we were lesser. Yep. We were taught they were better. Yep. And all of us got this message. You think that ain't gonna affect us? Is that why they never protect us? Put us in boxes and block us like Tetris? We built this whole country. Now you want us to exit? They calling us animals. They treat us like animals. They kill us like animals. It's me at the zoo. They calling us animals. They treat us like animals. They kill us like animals. It's me at the zoo.
All right, so here we are in front of the elephants.
So let's take a moment to think about what we just heard. And I guess the first question for the two of you is Jim Crow dead?
I think that the idea of Jim Crow, which basically is like a system made to, laws, ways of life to limit Black folk. I think it never died. Like back in the day, it was, segregated facilities. It was, not being able to vote. Those things. I think it's just transformed over time. Like many people are probably familiar with Michelle Alexander, who talks about the new Jim Crow being mass incarceration, which I think that's a part of Jim Crow, but it's the things that allow mass incarceration to be a thing You know, oftentimes the perception of Black folk is that they are dangerous, that they're this other thing, that they are a threat. So I think that it's not dead, and it's alive and well. It's just taking different forms.
And I guess, Corby, before you answer, let's take a minute and just kind of define Jim Crow so that we're all on the same page, because I'm sure we all have some idea of what we're thinking about. But for the purposes of what you two submitted and how you were thinking, typically Jim Crow refers to the repressive laws and customs once used to restrict Blacks and Black rights or the rights of Black Americans. And even if you reference our sister school at Ferris State University and its Jim Crow Museum, you know, Jim Crow was the name of the racial caste system that operated primarily but areas, particularly from the late 1800s through the mid 1600s. So Jim Crow was more than a series of rigid anti-Black laws. It was also a way of life, as you both suggested in your description as part of your artwork.
Mhm.
So go, Corby.
Thank you. When I initially thought of Jim Crow, or when I initially hear about that, I think of what you physically see, such as where it says "coloreds only," those type of horrific signage where certain people are allowed to use drinking fountains or bathrooms, or you have to use the back entrances to get where you need to be. As someone who loves pop culture and entertainment, and especially singers, it was horrifying to learn that people who I absolutely adore, like Nat King Cole, was not allowed to do what his contemporaries were. And yet he was so wildly popular, still to this day. The Jim Crow Museum was one of my resources for creating this piece. I wanted to know all about it before I went in with something that could be so igniting, so controversial. And so I think that Jim Crow, as I thought of it, may not exist, but it still is up here. And not just sometimes in my own mind, but in how our culture reacts and treats people who are different.
So then with that in mind, are we living in a second post-Reconstruction era?
Basically, after the Civil War, there was Reconstruction, and Reconstruction basically gave voice to a lot of voiceless, like African Americans. Like we couldn't vote, weren't in public office, and a lot of Black people were able to get into public office. But what happened was there was a backlash against that, and you know the KKK would terrorize and kind of flip all of the progress that was made after the Civil War in the Reconstruction era. So I personally believe that we have seen a similar thing in our country, because we've seen, you know, our first Black president, you know, have 2 terms, which would signal to Americans in the world that we have, you know, reached some type of um, some racial achievements, and that we're doing better than we are. But as soon as we see President Barack Obama kind of exit the office, we saw like this rhetoric through Donald Trump's candidacy and his presidency that kind of, you know, highlighted the racism that was there, but just put it like in the public view. So I feel like in that period, and I feel like we're still in that period, that we are like witnessing like a second wave of that um, after much success.
So in the chat box, there is a compliment and a question. the compliment is that your work is profoundly moving, and I can agree with that. I can understand how someone would get to that space. Now, how can people engage with you around your art, whether it's your song or your physical art, Corby? How can people find you? How can they access more of your work? Talk a little bit about availability.
As far as availability, my Facebook page for my artist page is Corby Blem Artist. Easy as that to find. Regular Corby Blem, he's kind of a jerk, but Corby Blem Artist, he's pretty great. A lot of people around town, they call me Mr. Underwear because that's one of the things I like to paint, and it's goofy. So not all of I paint boxer shorts, so for what it's worth. You can also go to corbyblem.com. That is my website, and where you can see a lot of my different activities I do around town in the community. I will be selling art at the Maple Syrup Festival coming up in a few weeks, so look for me there. I also teach workshops. Many of them are virtual, and there will be some more coming up soon.
If folks want to, find more of my music or any of the other things that I do creatively, they can find that at refugecreativecollective.com. Refugecreativecollective.com, and all of that is there. The music, also conversations like these that we're having right now, can be found on our podcast, Hip Hop and Homilies, which I am a co-host on.
Both talk a little bit about how you make this not just a one-time thing that you're doing so for something like the Diversity Symposium, but how this is part of your way of life. So you talk about all your artwork, Corby, but then there are other pieces, more pieces than Eeny Meeny Miney Crow. And Marcel was talking about hip hop and harmony. You to address the social justice issues outside of one day at work.
I love to create art, and I've never been a speaker or one who is always as comfortable speaking as I would like to be. But when it comes to painting and expressing myself in that way, it's wonderful to be able to put so much thought and study and engagement into a piece that then creates conversation. One of my pieces currently available is called Protest. It is a painting of civil rights leaders, Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. and Dr. Abernathy, who are kneeling in prayer. When I painted that originally, it was of the two of them praying because they were kneeling in protest, and that represented everything that we learned about Colin Kaepernick and why he was protesting. And such a simple, gentle act of kneeling was something he was told you can't do, and that it was very offensive. As that piece has gotten some time under it, the reason that these civil rights leaders were kneeling was because they were being denied access to voter registration. So this piece that I've created was not intended to be that deep or to continue to grow in its changing its voter registration laws. It has continued in its relevancy, which I'd hoped that it wasn't going to do. I wanted it to be dated, and yet there it is. That piece is available, and it is. I'm selling it to 100% have the sale price go to the LaMarcus D. Howard Scholarship, which is a scholarship on campus that is benefiting the multicultural community. And I would like the sale price of that piece, which you can see on Corby Blem Artist, and talk to me about that.
And for me, as Dr. Murray mentioned, this conversation is an extension of what a continual conversation that I have with my friends and family that is a part of the Hip Hop and Homilies podcast. Also, just like a focal centerpiece of the Refuge Creative Collective organization, where the mission is to, create community, create purpose, and create more. So every every piece of art that I put together is around, you know, creating meaning and to create community. And we can't have community if we are if we're not combating racism. So that's going to come up all the time.
We're so disappointed that we've run out of time to continue this dialogue, but we want to thank you for your participation in this year's Diversity Symposium. We look forward to what you have to contribute next year and your work throughout the course of the year that you do. So thank you very much. And for those of you who are continuing to follow us, thank you for staying with us all day. We will see you again at 3 o'clock for our open Q&A with some of the presenters whose work is posted in the listen portion of today's Diversity Symposium. We will talk through some of the best practices and new practices that are taking place across campus for how our colleagues are engaging in developing their anti-racist environment and their anti-racist identity. So we'll see you at 3.